Right, back live with you tonight here on In Focus. Spokesperson for the Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS, has retracted comments he made last night here on the show. As Mrs. Kosana had said that the South African Student Congress and the South African Union of Students agreed with the cost of operating the scheme's bank account following a meeting with those parties. In a statement, NSFAS says both student unions are actually opposed to the costs and alleged acts of fraud. Now, to make sense of what actually transpired in that meeting, we're joined by Asive Dlanjwa, who is speaking on behalf of the South African Union of Students. Asive, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. We've already established, of course, through the weekend that the students are unhappy on three areas. Quite okay with the fact that you want direct payment. However, the rollout has been less than satisfactory for you in terms of the onboarding process that is cumbersome, and sometimes students are not being assisted, and so thousands of them have still not been onboarded. There's a shortage of cards. There is an issue of bank charges. You're saying 1,650 is supposed to go to students exactly as it is, and currently you're seeing with penalties or bank charges of up to 150 rands, and there have been, of course, questions around the defunding of students. Let's talk about those issues that we raised. Last night, when we spoke to the spokesperson, he says, look, the issue of the bank charges is such that there is no facility, a financial institution that could give you services without at least taking some kind of fee to be able to do that administration. But he says there is no such a thing as 150 or a 10%. He says the fee is 12 rands. So was that raised in the meeting?
Yes, Butabo, and also just good evening to you and to your viewers. We did raise it in the meeting, the issue of bank charges. I think you are 100% correct that we would not necessarily have a problem with the direct payment system as a concept. We have a problem with how this one has been rolled out. So one of the first things is the charges. You are right. There would not have been a crisis if indeed what the spokesperson is saying was accurate. In fact, the students have been able to produce, which were also produced in the meeting yesterday, evidence to the fact that students are being charged up to 174 rand, some of them, on the various charges. So we completely rejected that as it is, and demanded that we revert back to the 12 rand admin fee that we had initially agreed upon. And NSFAS is committed to go back with the service providers to pick for where those errors were to fix that. And I think we agree right now that there will not be any charges above and beyond that. On the issue of the bank charges and how another bank would charge you, it's not necessarily true, Butabo, because you see, the students, when we agreed to the system, we agreed that it would be a bank where students would have bank cards and that you would have the functions of a bank account and as any other bank account. But what we saw here is that of all the students that were received, they had received their payment, 99% of them had not received their cards, meaning they would have had to transfer monies from those NSFAS accounts to their actual bank accounts to be able to purchase and do everything else.
And sorry, let me just come in there. And so he says that is where the extra charges are coming from that activity of transaction, which otherwise would have not exceeded the 12 rand if that was not happening.
Yes, but if the students, so it's two things. Number one, it's the fact that the students would have had to receive their bank cards and they would not have need to transfer. So it's the cost of transferring. We agreed that their cost would be below all costs in terms of all banks in South Africa. A direct transfer cost in Capitec, for instance, is 7 rand to another bank. They were charging some of them up to 55 rands and up to 35 rands. So those are things that we had all agreed on. So it's not necessarily true what the spokesperson is saying. Well, you don't even need to look at that. Even on social media, students have been posting their statements. The reason they had been rejecting this was because they were able to prove that, in fact, the bank charges were amounting to more than 170, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. One of the issues that I raised with the spokesperson was this issue of a banking license. And he says, no. The fintech companies don't have to have a banking license. They are almost acting on behalf, for example, of banks that have a proper banking license. So they are a fintech component to those particular banks. And then I asked the question, I said, but is that not, again, creating a situation where you are having to charge these exorbitant fees? Because this is a third party, so to speak, that represents another financial institution, and therefore they add their whatever management fees on top of what they would need to be taking to the company that holds the banking license. What was the explanation around this issue of banking license?
But we're not necessarily interested as to the business operations of NSFAS. We had a few principles that were given the scheme and the department as it pertains to direct payment. The first one was that it must be timeous. The second one is it must be user-friendly. The third one is that it must not cost to the students and that it must be standardized across all universities and colleges so that we don't see other universities withholding funds while others are paying. Those were some of the few basic principles we had given them. As to the business model that they use, it was up to them to do the necessary due diligence and within the financial framework, legislative framework of South Africa. We don't have an interest with that. Even now, we still don't have an interest in that. Our concern is that the students must get their money on time, all the time, and that they must not be charged exorbitant fees. As to the business operation and the business models, we do not necessarily have an interest in that. And as to whose license is being used, when, who's what, we don't have an interest with that. It must be within the confines of the law. 1, 2, it must achieve those principles as I've mentioned.
Sasco says they want consultants to be present on campuses to actually assist the students in terms of onboarding. I think we've lost Asive there on that line, unfortunately, as we're trying to get a little bit more out of what they've agreed on. That Asive Dlanjwa there, spokesperson for the South African Union of Students.